I want to kick off the first question by asking you, Katy, because you have a global purview. You lead the global operations practice at McKinsey. You work with clients around the globe. And maybe if we just start with the US, because I was poking around and read some of McKinsey's research, and a recent report on the future of work in America predicts that 39 million jobs could be displaced by 2030, and that's only 10 years away. Production is the third largest discipline to be impacted. What do you make of that? And talk a little bit about what you're seeing.
Sure. So what we did is we looked at all of the different tasks that make up all the jobs actually in the Bureau of Labor Statistics kind of total categorization of work, and looked at using existing technologies, how much of those tasks could be automated with technology that exists today. And what we found is that very few jobs are completely automatable, but of course, the number of tasks or the percentage of work that is expected to be changed will vary dramatically by the industry, the sector, and the nature of the work. And as you said, manufacturing and a lot of the operational roles, as you would expect, are at the top of the leaderboard.
And talk a little bit about what's the most important thing that's happening now. Is it reassigning roles? Is it upskilling? What's happening?
Well, what I see in the operations environment is a combination of needing to redeploy or recompose the workforce. So manufacturing sites, for example, but other parts of operations as well, bringing in data scientists, data analysts, having that really be a core part of the work that's going on, not just at headquarters, but actually on the shop floor, integrated into operations. And we see at the same time the work that traditional manufacturing employees are doing is changing. So you mentioned the report we're doing with the World Economic Forum around the leading manufacturing sites around the world. What we're seeing is that they need far less frontline production employees, as you would expect, with more automation. But the frontline employees that they have need to become much better technicians. And so they're doing lots more maintenance, they're doing more problem solving, they're doing more connecting the dots across different parts of the value chain, and less material handling, less loading, less machine operations. Actually, in many of the sites that we're studying, it's actually quite an empowering story for how the work is actually being upgraded and how workers are actually taking control of technology in a way that allows them to make their lives and their jobs better. But it does require real skill upgrading.
And we will talk about some specifics. Hopefully you have some case studies of where this is being done well. Let's ask you, Vipul. You work in tech, you're the CIO, and ADP also has a point of view on the future of work. Talk about that.
Well, you know, at ADP, being that we are the world's largest HCM company in human capital management, HR, there's a number of different trends that we see that are going on. One is about how work and where work actually gets done, and the fact that work actually gets done much more in dynamic teams than it does on what you look at your pretty org charts that are printed up for all of our organizations. And part of that work getting done and being in those teams, what truly gets work done is engagement. And when you get to that high level of engagement, that's when things actually change. And the difference at that from research we've done, so we have the ADP Research Institute that shows when you have team or work getting done in dynamic teams with highly engaged teams versus, you know, the opposite of that, those teams are more than 2 times more productive. In fact, 2.3 times more productive than the ones that are not. So getting to that teamwork, getting to dynamic teams, and actually finding where work actually really truly gets done, and then keeping those teams engaged, that's where the magic happens.
And when I think of ADP, I think of payroll. I think of almost the intersection. I think of it actually as finance. And so does the fact that payroll largely is how we structure tech and structure org charts, does that impact how people think about work and working in teams?
Well, if I going over to payroll for a moment, right? That's another theme and another trend we believe in is in that extreme personalization and work and pay your way, right? So one is on the way that people work, and if we take work for a moment, again, it's not just about employees. Our workforces in most of our companies today also involve contingent workers, involve the gig economy, and involve contractors. And if those folks on the teams are not engaged, you're actually getting a lot less productivity than you would otherwise. And when you switch over to pay, right, traditionally, we've had this view of pay, which is really set up more for the company, which is pay on a weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, a monthly basis, manage the payroll. And in reality, the individuals that are getting paid are the ones that need the money. And so there's a huge trend now of the pay at the end of every day, right? And get to a place where it's much more of that dynamic pay, not just dynamic teams and dynamic work, but also dynamic pay. And so it is about that personalization of getting paid when I need it most.
So getting paid when I need it most, personalization, that talks a lot about the employee experience. So Monique, I have to ask you, as our representative from HR, what is American Express doing?
Yeah, so I think of HR, excuse me, as very tied to everything we're doing, not as something separate. So it's a really critical part of the experience. And I think in today's day and age, everything is sort of stakeholder agnostic. You know, the experience of a consumer, a customer is very much tied to the employee experience, and it all sort of integrates if you do it well. And at American Express, really our vision is to have our customers have the best experience, the best service every day. And the best way to back our customers is really to back our employees. And everything about the experience is sort of important to us. It could be the physical space, the technology people use, the way work gets done, how they work in teams. 90% of our employees say that they would refer American Express as a great place to work. So we have highly engaged colleagues, as we call them. We refer to our employees as colleagues to drive the collaboration and the teamwork. Across the entire enterprise, we have very engaged people, and we think about their entire experience every day and how we help them drive that great service and experience for our customers. And so I think you really need to think about it that way, as not just sort of the HR people stuff, payroll, all the critically important stuff you can innovate around as well, to Vipul's point, but also just the entire experience of, is it an easy place to work, a hard place to work? Do I feel connected to my colleagues and doing important work on my teams? Am I getting the right learning and development? That's all the experience.
So we've already hit on some themes around engagement, the employee experience. I'd really like to dive into what that looks like. And one thing you mentioned is stakeholder agnostic. And so I think about multi-generations in the workplace. I think about upskilling. And I have to go back to you, Katy, and talk about upskilling. Are younger generations learning from older generations? Is it vice versa? How does that look?
Yes, actually, in several of the sites that we looked at, so we scanned 1,000 sites around the world, manufacturing plants, but the learnings, I think, apply beyond manufacturing to almost any kind of work. And we looked at what are the sites that have actually been most successful in adopting Industry 4.0, digital analytics, new technologies in the way they work, and really move the needle on performance. Many companies are struggling to really get good return on investment and see real business impact from new technology adoption. So we identified 26 sites around the world that have really achieved that. And one of the things that's really interesting is that several of these sites have created a very explicit multi-generation reverse coaching approach. So one of my favorite examples was Procter & Gamble had a site in Central Europe that was not performing well, older workforce, not one of their top plants, and they decided to invest in the site with new technology, and they augmented the current workforce with a younger generation coming in, and they actually set up reverse coaching such that the younger generation was teaching the older workers about digital technologies and how to use apps and things like that, and the older generation was teaching the younger one how to make creams and ointments. And when P&G shared that story last year at Davos, several of the other companies around the room kind of raised their hands and said, yes, we're doing something similar. So it's really a nice moment, I think, for companies that get this right to actually create that kind of multi-generational learning environment.
I'm going to get back to your point around 26 sites. That feels low to me. So we'll dig into that. But piggybacking on upskilling and multi-generation, do either of you, Vipul or Monique, have examples at your companies where this is happening?
Yeah, I would give an example. At American Express, we really are focusing on becoming an essential part of our customers' digital lives. And again, that plays right back to our employees. And I would say in terms of upskilling, we have a variety, a menu, as I like to call it, of different ways that you can learn informally and formally. For example, at a broad scale in the organization, we have well over 50,000 associates worldwide. There's different playlists that they can think about any employee becoming more digital, if you will. Then there's very specific things we're doing to upskill people around problem solving and using data and insights and analytics to really help solve issues and automate the right work. And then how do people work together in teams to work differently? And there's very specific learning and training programs. And I think to us, from what we've seen, from a generational standpoint, listen, all of us, whether you're a boomer, an X, or a millennial, we're all living our lives on our mobile devices. And I think that some of the differences there, and some of it, honestly, there's a lot more similarities than differences in terms of the way people are learning and engaging, at least in the case of American Express.
Yeah, similarly to ADP, we have, when we talk about these dynamic teams, it's dynamic not just on your skill sets, which is dynamic, right? So you have different types of skill sets that come together in these cross-functional teams, and it's also different ages. And there are a number of things. Look, we've been a very successful company for 70 years, and there's a lot of that history that comes along with it, and that history has to get passed on. Yet at the same moment, technology is moving so quickly today, and new things are coming out so quickly today on a annual basis or even faster than that, right? The data explosion, the technology explosion, all of it's moving so quickly. You don't have the luxury of saying, hey, yeah, this thing that I knew way back when is the only thing I need to know. Everyone needs to continually change. So I know in many different parts of our company, and like even in technology where we have it, we've got some now very specific programs and bringing in, and we label it contemporary talent. So it's hiring out of the universities, getting people earlier in their career and bringing in this contemporary talent and putting that contemporary talent next to the talent that's been around for multi-generation, right?
They have a name as well, like contemporary talent. That sounds amazing. What
Classic.
would someone like me who's been here for 20 years?
We didn't label it.
I'm teasing.
I put myself in that category, and I like to call myself classic. So
Classic, yes. We
Classic
did it on
talent.
stage. Very good. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but that's really it, right? Is we are also experiencing that, and again, so it's from an age perspective as well as a skills perspective, and bringing it all together in cross-functional teams.
Yeah, because you really, when you mentioned the legacy, the stories, and that's the root of corporate culture. And when you bring in contemporaries, have you seen that the future of work already is changing? Storied companies of 30 plus years, or even recent companies. How fast is culture changing within organizations? That's for anyone.
I can start. I think there's two parts to culture. There's a part of the culture that you actually don't want to lose, right? Because it's your values. It's your ethics, it's your morality, right? So the values of your company, and by the way, they're not because they're written on a window, because they're written on a door. It's what actually people live on a daily basis. So you don't want those to change, right? How you go about achieving those and living into those values, that will change over time. The tools that you use to be a productive company, the tools that you use to keep people engaged, those will change over time. But there's a certain part of the culture you don't want to lose. And other part of the culture, when you go back and look at it and say, well, why did we become the company that we are? How did ADP go to where it was? We're the original outsourcer. We're the original SaaS provider, right? You don't want to lose that. You want to keep that going. Believe in integrity is everything. Remember, we're dealing with people's payroll. So right. Integrity is everything. And when you're dealing with that, that's a part of the culture you don't want to lose. There's other parts. Let's move faster. We don't have to use the same tools that we did before. If we can help someone help themselves rather than us doing the work for them, that's what we want to change.
And how much of this is tied to the reason we are shifting and adapting to the future of work? Is it purely cost cutting? Do we see it that way? Are people re-envisioning the visions of their companies? Or are they looking at this expansively about augmenting? You used the word augmenting earlier. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, certainly new technology can dramatically improve productivity, and we're seeing that in manufacturing in the sites I described. I think what's more exciting is it is about agility and speed. And so I very much agree that in terms of culture change, almost every company that we work with is trying to figure out how to speed up. And the old matrix organizations that require lots of moving up and down the organization to get things done, it's just not fast enough. So how do you apply Agile, not just in tech, but everywhere? That is, what almost every one of the companies we work with is trying to do. And very much was part of what we saw as the success factors of the only 26 sites that have really gotten this right. They have agile cross-functional working teams that have engaged employees to solve problems rapidly using new tools. And it means they have to find ways of blending tech talent and traditional manufacturing domain talent together in teams that can make decisions quickly, not test things. So one of the things that we found is that the sites that did not make it into our 26, they all have programs going on digitizing manufacturing. Everybody does. There's no, company out there that isn't trying these technologies. Most of them are piloting, and many of the pilots are lasting more than a year. 26% of a recent survey we did, companies were piloting for more than 2 years. That's hardly a pilot, right? That's quite a failure. And so this whole notion of how do you change the culture, of course, building on the essentials, the values, et cetera, but how do you change it to be much faster, to the speed of business today, the speed that technology can enable, I think is really the critical element.
Thank you.
I do have to say, as the HR person up here, I think the culture, though, one very important component is the tradition, the values, the way work gets done in an agile way, moving faster. We're all talking about being more agile on lots of ways, but there's also the leadership component, which is really what is the tone at the top? What does the place look like, feel like? How do decisions get made? How diverse is the environment? Do I feel like I belong? And I think those are other critical elements in terms of people really thinking about, again, the total experience and how one company is differentiated, as an employer of choice from another. And I think that tone at the top, if you want people to move faster, how fast is the executive team moving and the senior management teams, et cetera. And for us, we think a lot about the culture from a leadership behavior component, and how do we reinforce that in all we do, not just what we're doing, but how we do it, and setting those different expectations, because there are a lot of similarities as you look, large company to large company, and how you drive those things. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to leadership and people and setting the right tone.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 2 studies, but I have studies galore up here. And I'll state them for us at the end, so if you want to check them out. And one of the studies from ADP was that, and actually let me just look at my, I was actually going to cite the McKinsey one, but I think I'm going to cite yours, Vipul, first around trust. And there's a fact that I saw about, in the research, about trust and trust in leaders. What are some of these, I'll just call them softer skills, around trust and empathy, inclusion certainly. Do we need to really be focusing on those? Are we good?
I think we do. And again, if you going back into what in that report from the ADP Research Institute, you actually see a differentiation on high-performing teams and the engagement on those teams when there is that trust factor versus when there's not that trust factor, right? And it's measurable, and it's a stark difference, right? So I think we absolutely do have to focus on it, right? It is something that if, as a leader, you don't bring your genuine self to show up, and you say one thing but do another, you're not going to have your teams follow you. And it gets even that much worse, especially when it's not a hard hierarchy on an org chart, and it's a dynamic team. Because at that point, people are like, well, I don't report to you, so why do I have to do this? So they have to trust you to say, yeah, I want to do this, and then you move forward. But there's a direct correlation between that trustworthiness and the engagement and then the performance.
And can I build on that? I think what we're seeing in an age of digital, et cetera, where people are worrying about, will robots replace all of our work? Will machine learning replace human judgment? I think what we're seeing actually is that from a skill perspective, it certainly puts a premium on all of us getting smarter about digital and the use of data. There's no question about that. even in the jobs that will not get automated away, they will change dramatically because we will be expected to use data and digital tools in a new way. But on the flip side, it actually puts even more premium on skills around developing empathy and trust, around interrelationship skills, on being able to connect the dots, on creativity. And so one of the things we're seeing, even in a manufacturing frontline environment, you see that those skills become even more important, and that they have to be developed both in the frontline employees as well as the leadership, because the value of these technologies is cost, as we said, but also coming up with completely new business models based on the flexibility that you're able to achieve. And you only do that if you've got teams that trust each other, can work together cross-functionally, and can get things done. So I think it's a very hopeful story about how we will use technology, or could use technology, to unleash kind of the next level of human potential and creativity. But it comes down to really re-emphasizing some of the core around trust and integrity and relationship.
How do we do that, Monique? I have to ask, because I used to work in the learning and development function. Is it just amping up your learning and development resources, giving workshops? What does it look like?
Yeah. Yes, and I think a lot more. You know, part of the equation here with all this conversation around technology and automation, AI, robotics, et cetera, is people still want to connect with their colleagues. They want to be part of high trusting teams. They want to be working on work that really has an impact and makes a difference. And for us, all of our colleagues are really focused on making our customers' experience and service just great. And there's such pride in that, and such pride in what we do every day. And they really are looking for people to be real, connect, kind of talk about their stories, and find different ways of doing that. And we really try to foster that environment and really integrate that into all of our training, our performance management, our talent processes. So it's really part of their entire experience, and also the way we do business, to the value and the leadership behaviors comment. You know, over 50% of our workforce globally is female. Over 40% of our executive committee is female. And we're a leader, I would say, around parental leave, gender neutral, 20 weeks of leave, and women who are giving childbirth are eligible for more time than that. And all of those things from a trust and connection. And if we're looking to back our customers, we're really looking to back our people to really engage in those very human ways too. So I think it's sort of integrating what you're looking for in the experience, and also upskilling people and investing in them to help them work in different ways. That's where it all starts to come together in terms of those higher levels of engagement.
And I found this statistic. It is a worker is 12 times more likely to be fully engaged if they trust the team leader. So 12 times more likely to be fully engaged if they trust the team leader. That comes from the ADP research. We have a little bit of time, but not too much more. And I'm going to ask my crystal ball question, and I'm going to start it with you, Katy, because again, 26 sites doing this. I'm encouraged. You use the word hope. Are we moving quick enough? And you can talk about it from the operations standpoint, or also other industries.
Yeah, no, we're not moving quick enough. You can define we almost any way in answering that question. Let me just speak, since we're here in New York, only 2 of the sites we identified were in the United States. And if you look at kind of the pace of adoption of new technology, we in the US seem to be lagging behind. And doesn't mean that there isn't great stuff happening in lots and lots of companies, but there is an opportunity to really use new technologies to close the gap or leapfrog in terms of the competitiveness, certainly of our manufacturing sector, but also other sectors. And it will be important for us to move faster. We did a report this summer that looked at, not manufacturing specifically, but we looked at county by county across the United States, which counties are in good shape in terms of employment growth, real wage growth, high levels of education attainment that would suggest readiness for kind of this new generation of technologies, and which counties aren't. And there's a very wide disparity, county by county across the US, in terms of which counties are positioned for success and which counties may be positioned to fall even further behind, and that's something we should take seriously. So yes, we need to move faster.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
We unfortunately don't have time for questions, and part of it is because we're on the live feed as well, but you are welcome to stay after and we'll get your question answered.
I mean, it's about the ethics of what
I'm
we're going to do with robots and AI.
I'm really sorry because we have folks listening on the live stream, and so they won't be able to hear your question. So we'll take this up after the panel. But let's close out still. And what is maybe I can ask a different question because we have such diversity up here. And who owns this opportunity? I won't call it an issue, but it does keep people up at night. I'm inclined to say future of work. Of course it sits with HR, but who's really the most worried about it, and whose shoulders is it on? I'm going to start with you, Vipul.
It's shared. I don't, again, back to like not labeling it, it's shared, right? You need, it's the setting that vision, setting that goal up front, starting with, yes, senior leadership, senior management, giving the tools to enable that, okay? Then getting everyone to buy in on it and marching through. I just want to use one example. You talked about crystal ball. I want to talk about a change, right? So one of the changes we have and that we've implemented is we don't have an annual review anymore. So we've implemented a system where instead of having an annual review, we do 52 weekly check-ins. So on a week-by-week basis. And I think it drives both trust, engagement, and it's a change from this annual review cycle that we do in HR, right? And we built the technology to help support that change. So if with each of my team members, I'm doing a quick weekly check-in, how are things going? What did you love? What did you loathe? Those are real words we use in there, love and loathe. I get to find out on a weekly basis from my team how things are going. That's how I check in with my manager. That's how we check in all the way up to the CEO.
What a mindset shift that people are experiencing it regularly. That's a great example. Monique?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said, which is it's very much a shared responsibility. Nothing happens at large organizations unless things are working together kind of as a system and you're reinforcing the behaviors that you want. For us, AI, robotics, we've been after it and involved for a very long time and is core to what we do in terms of the experience. But we find all sorts of new ways to innovate and serve our customers in better ways. It could be operations, it could be in better servicing, it could be through personalization. And that really all comes together across all of the stakeholders within the company, also having an outside-in view when we need it. And I think that it's really the responsibility of the collective to kind of reinforce what are those human elements in terms of the way you're organized, the way you do work, the way you upskill people, the values you hold, and at the end of the day, what that means for your business model in the future. So I do think it's very much shared.
Katy, do you agree?
Oh, yes, I am.
As our consultant, you get a wide view.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it does come to kind of the top team working together across functions, across business units with a shared vision. But I'd also say it's not merely hierarchical. It's also people who are in entry-level roles changing their own environment, bringing themselves to work, their whole selves to work, and the skills they have as digital natives as well as their value systems.
We need to tap into that generation because they are the future, and we had some great examples of upskilling and agility and the things we should be thinking about for future of work.